So like Valeria is saying, my name is Guilherme von Cüpper. It's a big pleasure to be here. One of my passions is actually speaking, teaching, lecturing. So it's really a major pleasure to be with you guys this afternoon. So complementing a little bit on Valeria's presentation. So like she was mentioning, I'm the CEO of Bourbon Sports Bridge for Talents, but we have a group that's divided a bit in three segments. So in the Bourbon Sports Group, we have first our Berlin Sports Law, which is, I would say, the first field where we started for the past 15 years. We are representing around 2,000 clubs all over the world, from clubs like Borussia Dortmund to Dynamo Kiev, NYFC. So almost in every country, we always have 3-4 of the top clubs that we are representing in all FIFA disputes, CAS disputes, etc. And then we also represent several federations, coaches, players like last year, Ricardo Quaresma, Michael Essien. So we have been working with some of the biggest talents in different sides of sports law, some more connected with FIFA disputes, CAS disputes, some even related to salary disputes, pension collection, so all kinds of different segments. Then we have the second side of the company, which was kind of coming from our expertise in sports, and especially the connections part of it, which is Bourbon Sports Consulting, where we do consultants on investments for example, investors wanting to come into multi-club ownerships or branding, sponsoring. So we try to be involved in all these different segments. And then last but not least, also our agency. And in the agency, we are basically taking all the knowledge network that we had and access to presidents of club sports directors to then intermediate transfers of players, some exclusively, where we have a big niche of African players, and some because of also our legal clients, we end up on intermediation of several of these. Myself, Valeria, I don't know if you want to come a little bit into my path. How did I end up here?
Definitely, because my first question was how Guilherme decided to co-found, and to be the founder of the sports law firm. Because actually, after your the career at Garrigues, because Guilherme was working at Garrigues, right? But you didn't work in sports law area there, right?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a, every time I give a lecture, one of the things I always love to speak is a little bit about my career, because it shows that you can definitely start in one point and end in a completely different one. So independently on where you start, for sure that life will be sure of putting you in the right place. For me, for example, I started in the area of corporate law in M&A in Garrigues. So the ones that are here from Spain, most likely you know it. One of the biggest law firms in Europe. And that was, after my law degree, I was doing purely M&A, corporate law, mergers, acquisitions. So that was my life. I had a tremendous passion for football, but I ended up working in corporate law and M&A. To be fair, I always loved the idea of negotiating, working internationally, and that was probably what was missing a little bit. Because usually all my friends and colleagues, they call me kind of an official body of the United Nations, because my mother, she's Portuguese, but born in Angola. She has roots from Holland and Spain. And my dad was born in Brazil, son of a German and a Russian. So as you can imagine, I think the international part of it always brought me to, for example, even when I went to law school, my idea was going into diplomacy, so nothing to do even with law. And then I ended up at Garrigues and in corporate law. What happened, and I think it's an interesting story for you to understand how things can change, was that I was always saying what I'm really, really missing is a negotiation part of it. And I think that the soft skills that I have, my love for languages, for being able to negotiate internationally and meet also people from different places, I need something that is more corresponding to this. So I decided to leave Garrigues to take a job as an advisor of the board of a Portuguese company, the Portuguese electricity company. I was advising the Chinese shareholders and some of our almond oil shareholders. And in the end, although it was a bit more close to what I wanted to do because I had a relationship with the stock market, with the shareholders, still something was missing. And 8 years ago, out of nowhere, I got a call from Jan and Georg, which are the founders 15 years ago of the Berlin Sports Group. At the time, only Berlin Sports Law was what we had, so we were working mainly in the sports law field. And they were looking for someone with some soft skills that wanted to speak language, was speaking languages, that wanted to work internationally, and that had the availability to travel and to network, and a big passion for football and the legal background. So all the ticks, to be honest, were there, but looked a little bit too good to be true. So I was a bit like, okay, how is this going to be? Because I'm an absolute big football fan, but I never worked in the field before. So I ended up going to Berlin for 2 months because at the time we only had the office in Berlin, and they gave me like 2 months of a master's internally, let's call it like this. So explaining me everything about the football industry, how to claim at FIFA, everything about not only the industry, so the legal part on one aspect, so studying the regulations, looking into actual cases, but at the same time, also knowing all about the football industry. And this is something that even these days we put a lot. So every time we have legal interns, every time we bring new lawyers, we do our own 1 month of tutorials so they can actually start to be involved in the cases and understanding how the day-to-day is. So following this, what basically happened was I was prepared to open our Lisbon office. And right now, firstly, we started with a Lisbon office as a second office that was created. And in the end, we decided to put all the legal team here. We have around 15 or 16 international sports lawyers right now working for us in Lisbon. And we left the other sectors of the company more in Berlin. That's why I travel a little bit between both. And then, like I mentioned, with time, especially my job was to start to move a little bit from only the sports law into the other sectors that we opened in the company. And currently we have all these sectors, around 40 people in the company, in different areas, like I said, from law to consultancy, to agency, to management, to investment parts. And I changed completely my career, I would say. So I always say that you guys are the future. You are the most prepared generation that is out there, especially in the field of football and sports law. And you have the door open like never before. New markets emerging. We'll speak about it soon, Valeria, but definitely new markets emerging for you. And your network really starts in this, which is attending these webinars, being part of conferences with institutions like Sports Law Hub, etc. So making sure that you meet as much people as possible, that because football in the end is really a niche, like it or not. So the more people you get to know, the more people you are involved in different countries, different scenarios, different possibilities, and different doors they can open in several countries. I think that's the kickoff and the start for your career for sure.
But Guilherme, do you think that right now it's more difficult to enter the market of sports law than it was 10 years ago? Because 10 years ago, it was not so many sports lawyers, like lawyers specialized only in sports law. And right now, because we have so many masters, I think there are more competition. No? What do you think? It's easier, or it was easier before?
I must say that this answer can be a little bit on both sides. On one hand, I think it's more difficult only because of the offer that exists right now in terms of masters, in terms of more concrete education, is of course way bigger than it was before. And of course, the sports industry and football is an industry that calls a lot of people, and it's kind of exciting. Everyone that would love law, but also would love the part of negotiating, the part of the competition, of course, will have a little bit of a tendency to look at sports law as a possibility. And having this in mind makes it, of course, a little bit more difficult, because it's not like you had much more sports law firms, specifically sports law firms, or clubs, of course, where you can work, or federations. I mean, it's moreover the same that you had before. Maybe sports law office is a bit more, but still, it's not like it increased a lot. But the offer of students, recent lawyers, is bigger. But there's the other side of it, which is, like I said, never they were so prepared. Never they had the education they have right now, the studies, the possibility to actually be able to go to conferences, because every day there's a really nice conference happening somewhere in the world. They can go there, network, meet new people, think about specific sides of the law. And having this in mind, I think there's also an open door. Then we must think that there are a lot of new emerging markets, like in the US, for example, where for a couple of years now, they are continuing to boost their industry, but more and more and more, they are opening to other kind of expertise. Like in the Middle East, for example, Saudi Arabia right now, if you look into the positions of the CEOs, the head of legals, the technical directors, most of them are European. So they're still, of course, a front line, I would say, of deciding persons that are Saudis, for example, talking about Saudi Arabia. But there's clearly a second line of technical people where they are bringing a lot of the expertise that is coming for Europe in order to improve the football over there. So there are a lot of new windows of opportunities in clubs, new countries, federations, that you should be able to take part of. So clearly, on that sense, it will also be an interesting route for you to start in the business. Then, just an advice I always give in classes, which is the importance of networking, like I said before, but also to finding your niche. So this again seems a bit contradictory, but I'll try to explain. On one hand, try to find your niche, because for sure a lot of you will have specific assets, I would say, or even specific entrances in specific markets. Maybe one of you has an amazing contact with 3 or 4 clubs in Brazil. Maybe one of you, for example, is an agent from Bolivia and has the possibility to bring some of the best players. So try to focus, of course, on markets where you know you can be something new, or you can put something new to the table. But on the same hand, you should try not to close the door on thinking outside of the box and opening yourself. For example, right now in Berman Sports, we have this 360 company that basically is ready to answer any question you would have and work in several sides of football. But we had to start with our niche. For example, in sports law, for the first couple of years, 15 years ago, we started a lot working with training rights. So identity contribution, training compensation, building, because at the time there was not so, the talks about it were not so big, the clubs didn't know how to do it. So we found our way in, and then with our good work, we were able to start to collect with these clubs a lot of more different legal work until we are today. Or with the agency, we had, of course, a lot of contacts because of the sports law side, but at the same hand, we started with the African niche in there in order for then after to start to intermediate players from all different countries. So having that in mind, be open, but also try to understand where your strengths are. I have a few tips for sure. And I'll start, especially when negotiating, of course, when you are with a weaker part, like you say, Valeria. But the first really big practical advice I give for agents and for lawyers is always work with mandates. This is the first thing. There is a tendency when you are starting in the business, because you meet someone there, because you have a contact in a club or a contact with a player, that you start to present this and put yourself directly in a position where you are kind of giving the gold immediately. And sometimes some players or some clubs can make use of it to try to trick you out of the negotiation, especially if you don't have the power enough. And after a few years of working in the field, we were able to see how important these mandates are. So just for you to be aware, you need to try to work on a few ways, which is, or you have a player believing in your career plan for him, and you have a player signing an exclusive representation agreement with you, okay, and you are secured that you are the only agent that's presenting the player. Second, you have such an interesting contact with an agent, and the agent, for example, knows that you are the right person to present the player in a specific country, but still, this agent needs to then say, I am the representative of the player, so I issue a mandate saying that for a specific club or for a specific country, you can still present him on my name. Or the player itself, if he has no agent, even if he doesn't want to sign a representation agreement, at least for the specific club you are presenting him, you need to use it. Usually, I think, again, it's something that you need to try to settle from the start. Because one thing that is clear is that people need to respect their contracts. And people need to understand what their contracts have. So, for example, most likely, if you are a good lawyer and anticipate these questions, if you tomorrow are negotiating a contract for a specific player, a specific club, and they are represented by a brand, you can say, of course, this player now is represented by this brand, but if he leaves to a different club, and if the different club has, it's mandatory that he will need to wear another brand, then, for example, we can terminate this contract. Or then we come into a certain situation that the contract is not admissible anymore. So we need to understand that by the player signing, for example, in a new club, it needs to be clear what he can or he cannot do. So let's say, for example, that the player A is representing an energy drink. If you want to do it well, you need to anticipate some, what Klaus saying, like, right now, the club where I am has not any agreement with any energy drink. So me personally, I want to make this branding agreement, but I want to safeguard that if in the end, by any chance, I go to a different club that represents another energy drink and is obligated in my contract that I don't promote any other energy drinks, then it will be a just cause for me to terminate this contract without compensation. So it's up to us in terms of compliance to kind of understand how we can do. A different thing would be, and this can happen, of course, is that the contract is not well done. For example, you sign just a contract saying I'm representing you and I'm getting now directly 5 million to be representing your company. And then only 25 days after you sign a new club, they have a contract with another energy drink and you need to cancel your contract. Then, of course, they would say, look, this is not admissible because you got your money. You didn't anticipate it in the contract that this could happen. So we need to get compensated, and it will depend a lot on what's in the contract. So it's a lot of, I would say, prejudgment, a lot of making sure you have clear rules in the sponsorship agreement, and you make sure that you protect your athlete for such cases where he needs to be involved with different brands because of the institution he's representing.
Can this same situation affect the negotiation? Because if we are an agent from Europe, we are used to deal with these same situations about legal frameworks that are established among all the countries or the majority of the countries in Europe. And it's so much different to deal, for example, with these private funds that we don't know sometimes how they function or how they want to make the business. Thank you.
Yeah, good question, João. And actually, it is different. It is different because of several situations. First of all, because most of these multi-club ownerships or structures, for example, that are owned by these companies or these multi-club groups, some of them have the tendency to try to centralize the type of player that they are doing, and then even the career plan of the player is different. So what you mean is sometimes you are selling a player, let's say, you go to and you sell a player in the US, for example, to NYFC, but you know that they belong to the City Group. So you know that probably this US player, your only reason why they are taking them is because in the end, if he's really good, they want to start, for example, the route USA Europe, and they want to send him to City, for example. So the way you negotiate, it needs to be clear when you negotiate with the multi-club ownership, what's the plan of the club. Of course, that the freedom of the parties is still there, because although they are a multi-club structure, we are always talking about different entities. So actually then the agent and the player always have a word. So it's not just because you sign in Red Bull Salzburg that they can just send you to Red Bull Leipzig. No, the agent needs to be in accordance, the player needs to be in accordance, but clearly the way they explain to you the plan, or maybe they say, look, now you are signing in this really small club, but because our idea is, if you know, as you know, we have a multi-club ownership and our main idea is to bring him here. So this is something that changes, of course, the course of the negotiation. Then, of course, the different thing is even in terms of contract and on salary, because maybe that you know that the power of that group can allow the player to get really big salaries, but you also need to understand that although there is kind of a CEO of the group, then usually every club has their own CEO. So although they respond to the group, in some of the cases, they still have their freedom to make certain transfers outside of the group, because of course, not all players need to come with the group strategy, because you also need to compete. You also need to build your team. You also need to take experienced players. So on one hand, understanding how the group think about that specific player and the career plan for them, or if that specific multi-club ownership, for example, is really individual, and usually they let the CEOs actually make their own choices and make their own plans for the players.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that we're more like 20 minutes more than we planned, but Ayush asked us, last question.
Sure.
As an agent, as a sports lawyer, what are the initial challenges you faced while balancing these two roles, and how did you overcome it?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question, Ayush. So, like I say, I think entering the business, entering this niche, which is sports, it's always the biggest difficulty, of course, because like I say, if tomorrow you go to a conference in Saudi and tomorrow in 2 days you go to a conference in France, most likely you'll see a lot of the same faces. So we know that this industry is a niche, let's say. And having this said, in order for you to be part of it, you can go whether coming from your competence, of course, because you are really good, because you did a great job on learning, on coming to lectures, on preparing yourself, on attending seminars, and that really can make you an asset. Or because, like I said, you were able to fight for yourself, to network, to go out of the box, to understand new ways of work, to take risks. And this, I think, it's the biggest part. And sometimes life is about taking risks. Maybe sometimes coming from a really safe job in a specific area and then wanting to go for your passion for sports. And I think that's probably the major challenge. But like I say, I think football is getting more and more broad. I think a lot of new opportunities are coming in new countries, in new emerging markets, in new fields, like the image rights, like the marketing in football, like fan engagement, like branding. So this means that a lot of new legal disputes are coming, new fields are coming. So in the end, I think that if you actually take the right path, you'll be able to reach where you want to be. It's my personal belief, at least.
Thank you so much. And in continuation of your answer, I also want to remind our attendees today, please check all programs of Sports Law Hub, because personally I love the project because it's kind of democratization, right, of education, because not all of us can allow study in another country's very expensive master. So in Sports Law Hub provides very like small courses of 2 weeks, for example, on sports arbitration, on football law, with the best sports lawyers in the world. So please check it out. And thank you so much, Guilherme.
You're welcome. And also just adding from your comments that one of the things that gladly I think you can take advantage of is because if we think about 8 years ago when I started in the business, there were not a lot of institutions like Sports Law Hub, for example, and people that actually want to make sure that you have the right entrance into the market, that you know the business, that you are able to meet people that are already working in the industry. So I want to personally thank Sports Law Hub. Thank you also, Valeria, for moderating this and for all the work that you have been doing in the past years with ISLA, and I mean, it's really good to see people from the new generation actually taking their time to help others to follow the same path. So thank you so much for that.